Hello and welcome back to Soundcheck by Support Act. This is Luke once again, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Ash King from the Indigo Project. Hi, Ash.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
You might be familiar with Ash. She's joined us a couple of times already, and we've covered some really fantastic subjects. But just to update you, Ash is a provisional psychologist and a researcher and content manager for the Indigo Project in Sydney, which is a mental health practice that approaches dealing with mental health issues with a sense of creativity. Is that about right, Ash?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. So what are we going to discuss today, Ash?
Something that I've been chatting about with a lot of my muso friends and a lot of my friends in the creative arts industries at the moment has been this issue of worthiness and self-worth. And I think that it's something that kind of gets thrown on the back burner at the moment as a point of discussion, because we think, oh, like, what do you mean having conversations about your self-worth when, there's people getting coronavirus and people getting sick and dying, and this is a huge world crisis, like, why do you need to be talking about yourself all the time? But it is one of my favorite things to encourage a conversation about. And I think that self-worth is central to all of our well-beings. So it's something that we have to keep an eye on.
Well, it's a key driver of a person's individual well-being, isn't it? Often, like purpose, whatever that purpose might be. Whether you're a crew member or a manager or an artist, whatever it might be, purpose is super important.
100%. And I think that this time can be really challenging for anyone who, is used to working in the music industry or, any creative arts where people are finding that they can't do their work at the moment. They can't do their job, and not really getting a lot of, I guess, support from, sort of big government. Like, I've been seeing a lot of articles where, bills keep getting voted down in terms of supports for arts funding, and people are going, oh, why are we talking about the arts now? We should be talking about, medicine and science and how we're going to get through, all of this corona crazy. And so I think that I feel really compassionate and feel like it's really important for us to see and acknowledge everyone who is feeling a bit of a hit to their self-worth when they're, for starters, not making any money, not being able to do their job, and then feeling like, the media and the government are just completely neglecting their value as a human being and as a creator.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to take this moment, I should have said it earlier, but for anyone who's experiencing any issues with their mental health or wellbeing at the moment, we encourage you to contact the Support Act Wellbeing Helpline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on 1-800-959-500. And it's staffed by mental health practitioners who are experienced with dealing with the issues that people in the music industry might have to go through. Now, going back to what you were saying, Ash, I guess with a lot of the stuff that's going on in politics around funding of the art sector and whatnot, people would look at that and it would affect a person's self-worth, I guess, to an extent. Not just because of government funding, but the mindset of a person who's always working in the gig economy, whether they be going out there being a sound person or a drummer in a band or whatever it might be. This would be a kick to the feeling of self-worth.
100%. And I think that it could be something that gets mildly neglected because it's not really something that you write up as anxiety. It's not really something that you write up as depression, although, a lot of self-worth issues do then go out to sort of touch into those spaces. But sort of self-worth is, like you said, central to our own well-being. And when you can't do what you want to do and you feel like you're not being seen, and I think that this is really key to this issue, is this feeling of not being seen, because not only are people not being seen in the work that they would normally do, whether you're sort of front facing or, working more behind the scenes, you're still sort of being seen and acknowledged by other creatives, other musicians, other road techs, whatever it might be. And so you're not being seen in a professional capacity. You may not be being seen in a creative capacity. And now we also feel like we're being sort of neglected socially.
Yeah, and I guess Maybe it's a sense of trivialization of of a person's vocation if they work in the arts industry. I mean, we're in a really practical time in history where, as a society or as as an earth, we're calling on, the contributors we need the most at the moment, which is our, frontline health workers, etc., more than ever. And perhaps it feels less important to work in the music industry now than it has ever before. But I'm not sure. Well, I'm certain that that's absolutely not the case.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to raise, because I do think that it then that then triggers people who may be having issues with their self-worth to not even bring it up, because they're like, oh, well, what am I contributing to this really tough time? And they may then feel like, they're reading all the cues and going, well, maybe I'm not important. Maybe what I do is not important. And I just want to say front and center that that is not the case, and that the arts and the music are some of the most beautiful and miraculous things that we have to enjoy and experience as human beings. I'm really passionate about it, and the arts have gotten me through a lot in my life. And as I sort of moved away from working sort of professionally in the arts industry into sort of psychology field and sort of doing science studies, the more I learn about science and the more I learn about research, the more I realize that you can't have one without the other. It's impossible, because science will never give us all the answers. And so sometimes I feel like all the other answers and support we need comes from the arts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the arts have been credited with, telling society's kind of story, I guess, and always responding really well when it's time for, when other people are in crisis. And I would say that would bounce back well from this to tell the story of COVID-19. And that's already been demonstrated through people streaming, live gigs or whatever it might be. What are some ways that you think people can kind of take stock of this, and if they feel like that idea of negative self-worth starting to creep in, what are some of your advice?
Yeah, the thing with self-worth in particular is that a lot of us pin our self-worth on what other people think, and a lot of us are raised to do that from a really young age. I mean, you think about whenever you were you sought approval from your parents, and your parents told you that you were doing a good job, and you went through school and you were waiting for your teachers to tell you, oh, you're good at this and you're good at that and you've done well there. If you grew up playing an instrument and you had someone go, oh, you're really good at that. And so you do it more, because sometimes it's kind of like a drug. We want that sense of approval from other people. And that actually throws back to, when we were sort of a tribal species hundreds and thousands of years ago, and we were living in these tribal communities of, say, sort of 20 to 50 people. And our livelihood really depended on being approved of within our group or within our tribe. So we wanted to do things that made people like us and made people approve of us. And so we tend to cling to some of those behaviors now and understand that, these are the things that other people like about me, and those must be the things that make me worthy. But then obviously you come up against an issue. So a bit of a personal share, but because I used to be a singer and work in the music industry full time. But when I had an issue with my vocal cords and could no longer sing, I came face to face with, well, what am I worth now? I'm worth nothing, because I used to make my money and I used to get attention and I used to get love and support through my work, which was being up on stage and singing and entertaining people. And suddenly, pretty much in one fell swoop, I couldn't do any of that. And so, it's like a really cold heart. It's almost like Wile E. Coyote, getting one of those huge anvils dropped on your head. Completely crushing to one's own sense of identity and sense of self. And so from there, you then have to claw your way out and go, well, if I'm still around, I've got to find something else to find worthy about myself. And I would say that, there's always the risk that something might not be around forever. There might not always, you know, you might not always be able to identify yourself as. You might think you're worthy because of the partner that you're with, but what if you and your partner separated? You know, you might be think you're worthy because of the sort of house that you're living in, or so people do pin their worthiness to external sources. And I don't think that it's an easy process, but I think that it's important for us to all spend some time developing a relationship with ourself that exists outside our need for approval from external sources. So finding that sense of who we are without it pinned to anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, you know, this is a crisis that's hit people's pocket as well, as much as anything. And, you know, self-worth doesn't have to be, you don't have to, you know, adjudicate your self-worth purely based on, you know, non-financial matters. A lot of people find purpose in making money and feel the affirmation that they are doing what they're meant to do by receiving money. So there'll be a lot of reassessing, I would imagine, in people's heads at the moment about how they you know, quantify their own self-worth.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite questions to ask, particularly a lot of musicians and creatives, is what's your idea of success? And I think that that question in particular is something that shifts so much from, say, you know, when you were, you know, maybe in your late teens, early 20s, maybe just emerging into the industry, and, you know, you really thought that your future was going to look a certain way, and you thought that success looked like a certain type of thing and it would feel a certain way. And then, you know, 10 years later, it might have a completely different appearance now. And I think that when we can start grounding our sense of success as something inward, and also I just want to say that sometimes when I talk a lot about sort of like looking inward and being with oneself. Sometimes people can get their backs up a bit and go, oh, it sounds a bit selfish, you know, like, shouldn't we be caring about other people? But the research shows that if we spend more time cultivating this relationship, this healthy relationship with ourselves, we become less self-centered. We become more able to offer resources and support to other people. And I can tell you just from my own personal experience that my life completely changed when I decided that I was going to start looking in first before I was going to, you know, try to solve all of the world's problems.
Oh, that's some brilliant insight and always illuminating, Ash. I'd like you to thank Ash King from the Indigo Project for joining us again. And if anyone out there is experiencing some tough times around their mental health or just their well-being in general, I encourage you to contact the Support Act Wellbeing Helpline on 1-800-959-500. Thanks so much, Ash.
Thanks so much, Luke. Talk soon.
See ya.